Hi everybody, I am author Caroline Starr Rose. This is my book Maybe that you've been reading along with Miss Josephine. And I just wanted to stop by and say hi to everybody, tell you a little bit about May, and then some other books that I've written as well. So if you have been listening in, you know that May is a really brave girl who doesn't actually realize how brave she is. She has to go through some hardships to determine what a brave and capable young lady she is. And when I wrote this book, I had two books in mind myself, or actually two book series if you think about it. One was the Little House on the Prairie series. I wanted to write a strong pioneer girl like Laura Ingalls Wilder. And the other series I had in mind would be Gary Paulson's Hatchet series, which is about a boy who is stranded in the Canadian wilderness and needs to survive on his own. So those two books were the inspiration behind May. If you enjoyed Maybe and you were interested especially in the fact that it was both historical and verse, I have another very similar book for you in that it is both historical and verse. Another book that I've written called Bluebirds, and this book is told in two voices. So you'll see some pages, some of the poems are devoted to a girl named Alice, and some poems are devoted to a girl named Kimi. And sometimes you will see both girls, let's see if I can find a poem, where both girls share one poem. So you can see this is when the two girls spend time together. And this is a story about, it takes place in 1857 on the island of Roanoke. It was the first English colony in the New World. It was not a successful colony. You might have heard of 1620 Jamestown. That was the first successful English colony in the New World. Roanoke did not survive. You'll have to read to find out what I think might have happened, at least in my storyline here, kind of the approach that I took. But I like to see this story of the doomed lost colony, as it sometimes is referred to, as I kind of like to call it a friendship version of Romeo and Juliet. So it's a forbidden friendship between Alice, who is English, and Kimi, who is Roanoke. She's Native American. And you'll have to read to find out how these girls become, not only have moved from enemies to the dearest of friends. My final historical novel is not in verse, but in prose. This one's got chapters, and this is called Jasper and the Riddle of Riley's Mine. It takes place in 1897 in the Klondike, which is a part of Canada, and it takes place during the Klondike Gold Rush, when the entire world was fascinated when gold was discovered, and people from around the world rushed to this very remote part of Canada to see if they could make their own fortunes. And this book is part mystery, part adventure, part survival story, and it's funny too. So you'll have to have a read about Jasper and his brother Mel as they rush to the Klondike. A few other books that you might be interested in. This is Ride On Will Cody, A Legend of the Pony Express. You might have heard of a man named Buffalo Bill. He was America's greatest showman. Here's a picture of Buffalo Bill in the back. And he had a show called Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show, where he would travel the country and then the world reenacting stories of the Wild West. But long before he was Buffalo Bill, he was Will Cody. And as a boy, he claims, we're not sure if this is true or not, but he claims to have ridden for the Pony Express and to have had the third longest Pony Express ride in the history of the 18-month Pony Express. He says that he rode continuously for almost 24 hours, covered 322 miles, and this ride required 21 different horses. So it's quite an adventure, and I encourage you to check that out. I also have a book that is kind of timely in light of this being hurricane season. For a time, I lived in southern Louisiana in Terrebonne Parish, And I was just intrigued with the plants and animals and the people and the culture and the fabulous food. And I just wanted to share this with the rest of the country. This is called Over in the Wetlands, a Hurricane on the Bayou story. What I wasn't aware of before I moved to Louisiana, and I felt really strongly that I wanted to share with other people, is I had no idea that the wetlands were threatened. That according to projections in the next 50 years, the area that I lived in Terrebonne Parish could very well be underwater because of the erosion of the wetlands. And so I really wanted to make the beauty of this area front and center, the resilience of the land and the animals, which I hope also can comfort children who might be nervous about hurricanes coming through. But I also wanted to really share about this uniquely important part of our country, of our world, of our ecosystem. So Over in the Wetlands, learn a little bit about Louisiana and the importance of the wetlands in our world. And finally, my most recent book. This is my first attempt at nonfiction. This is called A Race Around the World, the true story of Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bislin. And this was such an adventure to write because really and truly the history, this real story is even more exciting than fiction. So you might have heard of the story called Around the World in 80 Days. It was written in the late 1800s. And when that book came out, it was just really intriguing to a lot of people because it was fiction, but the idea that someone might be able to travel the world in 80 days just seemed beyond belief. Nowadays, that seems like a really slow trip. But at this time, that would have been lightning quick. And journalist Nellie Bly, actually both of these ladies were journalists at a time when only 2% of American journalists were women. Both Nellie and Elizabeth were journalists. Nellie wrote for a newspaper in New York, and Elizabeth wrote for a magazine in New York. And Nellie, after reading the book and after studying ship routes and train schedules, she decided that she could make a trip around the world in 76 days. She could beat the fictional character Phileas Fogg from the book Around the World in 80 Days, and she asked her newspaper if they might sponsor her. There were definitely some challenges in getting the trip to get underway. You'll have to read the book to find out about those. But she was eventually put on a ship and was traveling east to Europe. And there was a big splash on the front page of her newspaper that day that she was going to attempt to beat Phileas Fogg. And that morning, when the newspaper had the article, as Nellie left New York Harbor, a harbor in New Jersey, Elizabeth's publisher called her into the office and said, "I have an idea. I would like you to race Nellie Bly around the world, Elizabeth, and I would like you to start this race tonight." So, a complete surprise to Elizabeth. She's put on a train that evening and she travels west. So Nellie's traveling east, Elizabeth is traveling west. One of them wins. One of them takes 72.5 days, and one of them takes 76 days. I'm not going to tell you who the winner is. You'll have to read to find out. But the amazing thing is they both beat the 80-day record, and it is a really, really exciting story. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in, and I wish you all the best this new school year.